Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Szeltner in our Washington, D.C. studio. It is good to have you here with us. This week marks 100 days since United States President Donald Trump took office. On the campaign trail last fall, then candidate Trump sent a letter to pro-life leaders committing to 4 pro-life promises. He promised to nominate pro-life justices to the Supreme Court, sign the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act into law, defund Planned Parenthood as long as they perform abortions, and make the Hyde Amendment permanent law. We will be joined shortly by the chair of the Trump campaign's pro-life coalition, Marjorie Dannenfelser, and by Sarah Huckabee Sanders from the White House to discuss pro-life accomplishments in the first 100 days. But before we get to that, we want to bring you important pro-life news that could have a big political impact. For the first time, the head of the Democratic National Committee says all Democrat candidates must support abortion. According to a statement in the Huffington Post, DNC chairman and Jesuit-educated Catholic Tom Perez said every Democrat, like every American, should support a woman's right to make her own choices about her body and her health. That is not negotiable and should not change city by city or state by state. To be clear on church teaching, here is a statement from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' resolution on abortion. No Catholic can responsibly take a pro-choice stand when the choice in question involves the taking of innocent human life. Perez's statement came after Senator Bernie Sanders supported Heath Mello for Omaha, Nebraska mayor. Mello, a Democrat, has previously voted pro-life. For reaction and analysis, we are joined by Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List. She also chaired candidate Trump's pro-life coalition. Marjorie, thank you for being here.
I always love being here with you. You know that.
So what has happened? Has the Democratic Party just completely abandoned pro-lifers?
Well, I think there's a strong note of clarity on what the position really is. I don't think it's a new thing that the party has abandoned pro-lifers. What's new, it is very vocal, is very strong, it is very offensive to the many rank-and-file pro-life Democrats that are out there. There's an enormous disconnect between Washington, D.C., DNC, leaders of the Democratic Party, and the rank-and-file pro-lifers. A third of Democrats self-identify as pro-life. A third of state legislators in 20 states voted for the 20-week pain-capable bill. There is a very large chunk of those voters that are part of the Trump pro-life victory. So there's clearly a disconnect, and there's clearly a problem that they have in the Democratic Party, and there's going to be a day of reckoning.
And it seems that the Democrats should want to cater to pro-life voters if, in fact, nearly 30% of Democrats are pro-life.
Well, I think you have to think about it how they do, and that is they see this as a humanitarian effort on their part. They believe that we are telling a woman what she can do with her own body, and it's wrong. They do not believe that there are 2 people in every decision. So understanding it that way, we would be incredibly unreasonable to be building a movement based on what we know is true. So I believe that it's the power of their convictions that's behind this. I don't think it's political. But what it does have with this immoral stance is a very detrimental political effect. And it's already been shown to be true in previous elections. We have a majority pro-life House, majority pro-life Senate, majority pro-life state legislatures, and a pro-life White House. Now you tell me whether it's a good idea to be pro-life or not in this political atmosphere.
And yet at the same time, in an exclusive interview with Meet the Press, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said, of course Democrats can be pro-life. Is that true, or are we seeing some disunity within the Democratic Party?
Well, she's very artful in the way she discusses the pro-life issue. She's been there a long time. She calls herself a devout Catholic. She's a devout Catholic that wants Roe versus Wade to stay in place, and she votes for every single abortion that is. In the next sentence, she went on to say that she's worked with some pro-life Democrats in the past, and they were really nice people. But there's no way that they will budge on this particular issue. I do know that when we were very successful in unelecting a lot of people who had said they were pro-life, that were Democrats, and then they voted the wrong way. There was no tears shed by the leadership and by Nancy Pelosi at that point. It was good riddance to sort of purify the party and get those people out.
Also this week, President Trump marked 100 days in office as the chair of his pro-life national coalition. Has he accomplished what you had hoped he would by this point?
I don't think that it'd be possible to do much more, to be perfectly honest. And when you look at past administrations, there's no comparison. I think it begins with who is in the White House, and I certainly mean the president and the vice president, but I mean all the staff. The atmosphere there, and I've been there many times and met with the president and the vice president and the staff, is very collegial. It is, we have shared aims and objectives. It is, you know, roll up your sleeves and get the job done. Their administration began with the first White House presence at the March for Life ever, succeeded immediately by overturning the Mexico City policy, then signing a bill to overturn Obama's denial of states' rights in defunding Planned Parenthood on the state level. And on and on. And so, and on and on. What we can't forget, the confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, which some would say that would be enough for a whole administration. Now, I wouldn't say that, but it is an enormous move, and we might see another one coming very soon.
Something that we will be watching closely. Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you.
Thank you.
The call to action is a way for you to be engaged in the pro-life movement. As we mark 100 days into the Trump administration, we want to thank our president and vice president for pro-life goals already accomplished and encourage continued pro-life victories. Here is how you can join in on this week's pro-life call to action. Go to sba-list.org/EWTN. Here you can say thank you to President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence for their list of pro-life accomplishments. 100 days into the administration, those accomplishments include making strong pro-life appointments, reinstating the Mexico City policy, defunding the UN Population Fund, allowing states to defund Planned Parenthood, and confirming Justice Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. Make sure your appreciation for these pro-life accomplishments are heard by our administration. By going to this website, you will also send the message you want the president and vice president to defund Planned Parenthood at the federal level and to sign the pain-capable Unborn Child Protection Act into law. Let's keep up this pro-life momentum. Let's be sure our pro-life voices continue to be heard. Go to sba-list.org/EWTN. We will have more on Trump's first 100 days, including an interview with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. But first, we turn to other pro-life news. An Irish group of citizens formed to advise the Irish government votes overwhelmingly for the country to legalize abortion. The Citizens' Assembly wants to repeal the 8th Amendment of the Irish Constitution, which gives equal right to life to a pregnant woman and her unborn child. Irish pro-life group The Life Institute calls the Citizens' Assembly a farce and says it is shocking and sad the unborn child was ignored in their vote. Arkansas carries out the first double execution in the United States since the year 2000, putting 2 men to death Monday night. Attorneys for the second inmate, Marcel Williams, convinced a federal judge to briefly delay his execution over concerns about how the earlier one was completed for prisoner Jack Jones. The judge ultimately lifted her stay. This double execution follows the execution of Liddell Lee last week. The Arkansas Department of Correction confirms to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly Lee chose communion to be his last meal. The University of California, Davis is under fire for dispensing Plan B contraceptive pills in a vending machine. Plan B is an abortion-causing contraceptive often referred to as the morning after pill. Students for Life responded, calling on universities to offer pregnant and parenting students financial aid, diaper decks, and childcare, not abortion drugs. We turn back to this week's top topic, reviewing President Trump's first 100 days in office from a pro-life perspective. As we continue to monitor how the administration is following through on pro-life promises, we speak with someone who works closely with the president. Sarah Huckabee Sanders serves as Principal Deputy White House Press Secretary. She joins us now from the White House. Sarah, thank you for your time.
You bet. Thank you so much for having me on.
100 days in, has President Trump achieved what he set out to do by this time regarding his pro-life goals?
Look, I think he's actually got a huge list of accomplishments when it comes to supporting pro-life legislation and taking executive action to support something that he campaigned on and repeatedly promised to the American people that he would support, and that's being pro-life. He made a number of appointments to key positions, including the Vice President, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the HHS Secretary Tom Price, all outspoken pro-life advocates in positions that will matter when it comes to pro-life policy and pro-life legislation. You've also got the confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, which is a monumental appointment and something that I think has generational impact that will carry on long after the president is out of office in 8 years. This is something that I think will be one of the biggest legacies of his presidency, and that is in Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch. But also legislatively, he's taken action through congressional review acts to allow states to opt out of funding Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics, which is a huge step in the right direction. He's continuing to do that through supporting health care reform that includes taking away funding again for Planned Parenthood across the board, and he'll continue fighting for pro-life legislation and I think become and be one of the most pro-life presidents that we've ever seen.
Sarah, President Trump also campaigned on repealing the contraceptive mandate in Obamacare, which requires employers to provide contraception. When can we expect to see that repeal happen so religious groups like the Little Sisters of the Poor aren't forced to violate their conscience?
Look, the president's made no secret that health care reform and certainly repealing and replacing Obamacare is one of his top priorities. That's something that he and his administration and the team are working on constantly, day in, day out, and we hope to see that get finished and completed here in the coming weeks. And we don't have a set timetable, but we do hope that that happens soon, and it certainly remains a top priority for the president.
President Trump is admittedly a convert to the pro-life cause. How is he continuing to stay informed on pro-life matters? And what would you say, Sarah, to Americans skeptical the president prioritizes the life issue?
I think it's extremely clear that he's made it a priority by the number of actions that he's taken in his first 100 days in office. But not only that, but who he has surrounded himself with. You've got the vice president, who's one of the most outspoken pro-life advocates in the country, Kellyanne Conway, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the HHS Secretary Tom Price, as well as many others within the staff and within the walls of the White House that are outspokenly pro-life. And I think that's a testament to where the president is on this. But not only that, but the actions that he's taken in these first 100 days and making it a priority in his administration. I think you'll continue to see him do that over the next 100 days and the 100 days after that through the 8 years that he will be president.
We have had pro-life U.S. presidents before, and there has been bitter disappointment in their actions. What makes President Trump different than other politicians who campaign on the pro-life issue?
Look, again, I think it is that he's already made it a priority. It was one of the first actions he's taken in these first 100 days, and he's made a repeated commitment to continue fighting for pro-life legislation. That's one of the pillars that he's talked about in repealing and replacing Obamacare, which is one of the top priorities for his administration currently. And so I think we can expect him to continue, just like he has over these first 100 days, fulfilling on that commitment, whether it's reinstating the Mexico City policy, working through the Congressional Review Act, appointing Supreme Court justices that are pro-life, and again, top appointments in positions that will matter in the pro-life movement.
You mentioned Justice Gorsuch. If President Trump does have the opportunity to nominate a second Supreme Court justice during his presidency, can we expect that nominee to be a judge who upholds the sanctity of life?
Look, I think that the president was clear from day one. He laid out a list of 21 potential people. Now that list is down to 20, since one of those is now a Supreme Court justice. And that list was widely celebrated by conservatives across the country, and there was certainly no dispute that the people on that list would be advocates in protecting the sanctity of life through the judicial process.
And finally, Sarah, I want to get your reaction to DNC Chair Tom Perez's statement that Democratic candidates must support abortion. What do you make of that? And does this make it impossible for bipartisan work in the pro-life movement?
I think it shows just how out of touch the Democrat Party has become. I think it's one of the reasons they lost in November, one of the reasons they continue to lose moving forward, and one of the reasons I don't think they'll be successful during the midterms. Perez showed once again just how out of touch he is with Americans, and frankly showed that he shouldn't be in a position of leadership. And I think it's frankly sad for him, for the Democrat Party, and for America.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, thank you for your time.
You bet. Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to continue on this topic, President Trump's first 100 days, with this week's expert panel of political and pro-life insiders. Stephen White is a fellow in the Catholic Studies program at the Ethics and Public Policy Center and author of Red, White, Blue, and Catholic. Charmaine Yoest is a senior fellow for American Values and worked in the Reagan White House. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Catherine.
Pleasure.
So, Stephen, first off, can you give us some context? What does the church say when it comes to pro-life policies and how they should be prioritized?
Well, both in the gravity of the issue and the scale of the issue make the abortion issue a high priority, both for consideration of voters and for policymakers. Obviously, the dignity of human life is a foundational principle of Catholic social teaching. It gets should be considered weightily by voters. We've heard this from popes. Going back all the way to the Second Vatican Council, we hear about the grave crime of abortion. We've heard it from John Paul II, who talked about the need to protect life in law, and that the failure to do so is the end of freedom. It eradicates freedom. It's the death of freedom, as he says. And so this is a very important issue. It's not the only issue, but it does have a great weight and a great priority in both consideration of voters and consideration of politicians.
Charmaine, you worked in Ronald Reagan's White House for years. You were president of Americans United for Life. So how would you score President Trump in his first 100 days from a pro-life perspective?
Well, Catherine, I'd start by saying that I think it's really important to emphasize that there's nothing really magical about 100 days. And part of the reason I start with that is I'm a little concerned about the fact that we're seeing this construct used as a way to kind of beat the president over the head and to say that, you know, this is this measurement that we're going to use. We are just at the start of 4 years, possibly 8. There's so much more to go down the road and so many opportunities in front of us. Having said that, I think this is really an exciting time to be in the pro-life movement. I mean, let's think back to January, right? Like within the first weekend of this president being inaugurated, he reinstated the Mexico City policy, saying that we weren't going to pay for abortion overseas. And that was just the start of it. I don't think we've really, you know, things have been going so quickly, everybody's kind of taking a deep breath, but let's not race over the fact that Judge Gorsuch was just confirmed to the Supreme Court. That's a monumental achievement. If the president did nothing else, even in this entire year, that would be a tremendous accomplishment to have put someone who is a constitutionalist on the Supreme Court. And we're hearing pretty reliable rumors that we may have another confirmation battle coming up this summer. That's going to be even more dramatic, this opportunity to fundamentally reshape the real tenor of the court.
Because that could have an impact on Roe v. Wade even. Now, Stephen, I don't want to backtrack too much into the 2016 campaign, but there was a lot of skepticism on whether Trump would follow through on his pro-life promises. So from your perspective, what have you made of his accomplishments?
I think he's done about as well as one could have hoped on life issues. As Charmaine already pointed out, a couple of his big people who voted for him because of this have been rewarded, let's say. In fact, he's done better on these issues and been able to do more on these issues than he has on a lot of other things. You've seen the health care plan stalled, and he's running into some delays with tax reform. But on this, he's really come through, and that's good. And people should be grateful for that. As Charmaine said, there's more to come too. I also think that there's caution and vigilance required. Donald Trump's not a perfect man. He's not a perfect president, even from a pro-life point of view. And there's a danger in taking early victories and making him into sort of the figurehead of a pro-life movement, which could backfire later on. Not everything he says and does is something that we should admire and praise. And so there's a danger, I think, in letting him become the de facto head of the pro-life movement. We should be grateful for him and praise him for things he does well, but also remain vigilant, because not everything he says and does is going to be praiseworthy.
Well, if I can piggyback off of that, Stephen, I think it's really important to underscore the fact that no, he's not the head of the pro-life movement. He's the president. And going back to your point about my background, starting out my career in the Reagan White House, I was in presidential personnel. And one of the things that President Reagan became known for was the theme that personnel is policy. And that's why it's important to say this is not just about Donald Trump. It's about the fact that he has brought in with him an entirely new administration. And across the board, even from Trump skeptics, we've been hearing people saying, you know what, this is a really good cabinet. This is really good appointments that we're seeing across the board. You know, Tom Price over at as Secretary of Health and Human Resources, somebody that we've known, solid pro-lifer for years and years. Kellyanne Conway over in the White House. She's really one of us. She's been a pro-lifer for many, many years. So, you know, we could go on and on as we list down the people who are committed to the life issue within the administration. And, you know, that is tied together with the appointments with Judge Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, in that it's more than just the court. It's a presidential administration is thousands and thousands of people across Washington, D.C. making a difference day after day after day.
And it is still early on, like you said. We'll be looking at what President Trump accomplishes and holding him accountable to those promises that he made. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Catherine.
When we come back, an alarming news show premieres on cable TV, and we introduce you to a former abortionist who now runs one of the largest pro-life U.S. medical practices. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Szeltner. In our Speak Out segment this week, we look at an example of assisted suicide glamorized on the small screen. Mary Kills People premiered on Lifetime last week. Billed as a dark comedy, the show features a doctor who secretly runs an assisted suicide business on the side. Lifetime describes this character as a woman who helps people in need end their lives with dignity. The Euthanasia Prevention Coalition is calling on people to boycott the show. The irony runs deep with this television show, a program on death featured on the Lifetime network. And the show's title, Mary Kills People, a major juxtaposition to our Mother Mary, who gave her fiat, her yes to life. Mary, the main character in the show, says she wants to end people's suffering. She wants to be compassionate. But as St. John Paul II reminds us in the Gospel of Life, true compassion leads to sharing another's pain. It does not kill the person whose suffering we cannot bear. Unfortunately, this show's script seems riddled with propaganda promoted by euthanasia and assisted suicide lobbyists. Killing another human being should never be normalized, not on television, not anywhere. Remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death by following this week's call to action. Go to sba-list.org/EWTN. Tell President Trump and Vice President Pence thank you for their pro-life accomplishments so far and encourage them to take continued pro-life action. He thought he was helping women, but now one Catholic doctor realizes performing abortions only created more brokenness. For this week's Pro-Life Focus, we bring you the radical conversion story of a former abortionist who now leads the largest fully pro-life OB/GYN in the United States.
Tepeyac OB/GYN, how can I help you?
Located in Northern Virginia, Tepeyac Family Center is a first-class pro-life medical facility.
I heard about Tepeyac from a friend. This will be the second pregnancy with this practice.
So let's see how you're doing.
Christine Silva has been a patient for over 20 years. She chose Tepeyac because she felt her Catholic faith wasn't respected by her previous doctor.
He just started listing all of these different contraceptives. And he finished and he looked at me and he just asked again. He's like, so what can I prescribe for you? And I just looked at him and I was like, doctor, we practice NFP, I'm not going to use contraception. And he actually laughed and said, okay, I'll see you back here 6 months pregnant again. And that was the end of the visit.
With 5 providers and a physician assistant, Tepeyac is the largest fully pro-life OBGYN in the U.S. But its founder, Dr. John Bruchalski, hasn't always practiced life-affirming medicine. Though raised Catholic, Bruchalski gave in to what the medical school system preached and performed abortions as a young doctor.
Contraception, abortion were part of OBGYN. And if I was really good at PMS, and if I was really good at menopause, and I was really good with my hands surgically, you want to be the best. You want to be the best at what God's presented you with. And in this day and age, sadly, you had to provide abortion care.
Then, during a trip to Mexico with his friend, he visited the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
I hear internally, why are you hurting me? I blew it off. I thought it was too hot. Yeah, done. Why are you hurting me? Well, I was already a medical student heading down this road. It didn't make any sense to me at the time, but I refused. My heart was getting hardened.
He went back to the U.S. and continued to perform abortions. But after going to a second religious pilgrimage, Bruchalski claims he heard Mary again.
Johnny, practice excellent medicine. Be the best doctor you can be. See the underserved as best you can in your daily work. Follow the teachings of my son's church as found in scripture and tradition. So definitely the baby's head is right there.
Mm-hmm. He went to confession, stopped performing abortions, and founded the pro-life OBGYN with the Marian-inspired title. Tepeyac is named after the hill of Tepeyac, where Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared to St. Juan Diego in 1531. The OBGYN even has a chapel inspired by Our Holy Mother. But the practice serves people of all faiths and all economic statuses for its higher mission.
You can just tell that they care about the whole person, not just the physical body, but they care about the spirit, they care about your soul, and you just really sense that.
Scary for number 4?
Yes.
Our Lady of Guadalupe, pray for us. If you want more information about Tepeyac, you can visit tepeyacfamilycenter.com. That's it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Remember, you can reach us anytime at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. I look forward to seeing you here again next week. Life is a gift. God bless.